Hello and welcome to Lux's webinar, Standing on the Shoulders of Giants, the Strategies, Lessons, and Challenges of Industrial Digital Transformation. My name is Andrew Stockwell. I lead Lux's global research, consulting, product, and marketing teams, and I'll be your host today. Our speaker today is John Melnick, director in our research organization and the global leader of Lux's digital team. If you have any questions for John during the webinar, please enter them into the questions box. If you have any questions about Lux, please email them to questions@luxresearchinc.com, and we will be sure to follow up with you directly. With that, John, over to you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And thank you all for joining and letting me share some of the lessons we've learned from working with clients across the physical industries in what it means to digitally transform their organizations and what it means for them as their industries are undergoing a digital transformation. I'll start by talking about the challenge here, this digital challenge and what it means and why it's important. In section 2, we'll talk about some of these lessons and really these transferable lessons across the different physical industries and how you can apply them to your challenges. And then in the third section, we'll take a hypothetical new business example around materials innovation and looking for new business opportunities in materials as they're related to healthcare and how you might use some of these lessons and apply it. And we'll start with the challenge. And I can tell you that the challenge is not money. There is a lot of money going into this space. This year, organizations within the physical industries will invest over $1 trillion into their digital transformation projects. And that is growing rapidly with over $2 trillion going in by 2022. It's also not a technology problem. I mean, the technology is evolving very, very quickly, even too fast for some people. If we look at investment in VC funding in artificial intelligence startups, you can see a rapid rise in funding over the last 5 years and over 25 billion invested last year, and 2019 is on pace to surpass that. There's not a lack of expectations or hype here either. Here you have a quote from the CEO of Google saying AI is going to be more important than fire or electricity, placing it on the order of the most important innovation in the last several 100,000 years. So digital transformation at the end of the day has a lot of hype behind it, a lot of opinions, a lot of expectations, and a ton of money. But the reality is that a lot of the technology doesn't work as promised. I mean, examples like 40% of AI companies don't actually use AI. And even if they do, the challenges of implementing some of these technologies and the introduction of biases, different challenges in ways that they can fail, new dangers between cybersecurity and other failure modes. And at the end of the day, over 80% of the projects in digital transformation wind up failing. So the question is, what do you do? And we take a page from Isaac Newton and the inspiration for the title of this webinar. And you really try to understand what works and what doesn't work by seeing what other people have tried. And one of the advantages of working on it at this point is there's actually a really big data set to draw on about what works and doesn't work in the physical industries around a successful digital transformation. Because at the end of the day, whether you're in industrials or healthcare or CPG, and we work with clients in their digital transformations across all of these industries, and whether they call it digital transformation or Industry 4.0 or the fourth wave, fundamentally they're undergoing the same challenges. Because what winds up happening is new competitors come into your space, whether they're tech companies, whether they're startups that are able to scale faster, and your capital assets don't provide the protection that they used to. Whether it's shifting the core competencies that you've developed over decades, if not centuries, are now becoming less and less important and more diluted by digital capabilities, as well as industry dynamics of the potential of traditional competitors doing digital better than you. Digital transformation has the opportunity to really upset all the dynamics within your industry. And then you really have two ways to respond, which is the challenge here, which is either you invest in digital transformation efforts, in which case it's really easy to be part of the 80% of failures, or you don't, in which case you're falling way behind. So as we turn the page and look at really what are the lessons from other digital transformations, and how do you then start to apply them to your business? And the first question is, what are these commonalities and lessons that can be applied? So the first one is these industries were changing before digital came along. Digital is just putting these existing changes on steroids and making them go much faster and making the core differentiation based on how digital is being applied to these changes that were already existing. So whether you're in power and struggling with how to integrate a rapidly changing generation mix onto the grid, or whether you're in healthcare and fighting these battles of increasing cost and that being further exacerbated with an increasing aged and chronic care population, these changes within the industries were happening. It's just digital's making winners and losers out of the people that can take advantage of these changes anyway, and how to do them the most successfully. But that's what's creating that opening for digital more than anything, is these ongoing industry changes. The second thing that's similar across all of these digital transformation efforts is the value proposition. And there's value propositions across processes and some of the operational ways that people are using digital, whether it's in manufacturing or innovation. And there's ways that people use digital on the product end to get extra value or new revenue streams out of their product. And we work with clients on both sides of this. For the sake of this presentation, we'll just talk about process and the way that digital is helping companies today really maximize their operational efforts. And this is happening across really every function of an organization, whether it's in supply chain or manufacturing, with a lot of predictive maintenance and Industry 4.0 initiatives going on. Today, I'll just talk about an example within product development to illustrate some of these changes that are going on. And one of the ways that we're seeing digital transform processes was within the innovation process itself and the use of informatics in product development. And you can see this now where it started in bioinformatics over a decade or 2 decades ago, starting to penetrate a lot of different physical industries now, whether it be in chemicals, and you have examples like Showa taking an order of magnitude off of their polymer design time, or within automotive, where companies like Cooper Standard and Uncountable are both shortening their development cycles and doing significant cost reduction in the process. And now in food, where it's having a greater and greater impact, and an example here with McCormick designing seasoning packets and again, shaving 70% off of their development cycle times. And what you see here within the digital transformation of physical processes is that while it can take quite a long time for these process improvements to develop in one industry, like we saw with bioinformatics and its impact in pharma, as that matures, it really scales into other industries quite quickly, as a lot of the tools and fundamental value proposition stays the same as new industries start to understand what data to input and how to work it into their development workflow. The third area that's quite similar, the same across these industrial digital transformations, is the technology. And we can talk about all different types of digital technology here, whether it's AI or 3D printing or sensors. Again, this fundamental technology that's used across these digital transformation efforts. For today, I'll just show an example within computer vision, where you see innovation across computer vision in the sensing elements, in the algorithms to process, and then the actual physical processing of the imaging and of the sensing. But what you start to see, and Orbital Insight is a great example of this, where they take satellite data and they provide analytics on top of it. And when we interviewed them in 2016, they were focused on two industries. They're focused on retail. So what they were doing is using satellite imagery to track mall traffic and counting cars. They were doing something similar in oil and gas, where they were using satellite imagery to analyze gas tanks to understand global supply. And while it took a while for this company to start to get into these markets, start to scale, start to develop a significant customer base, in a very short time, over the course of 3 years, when we interviewed them in 2019, they had now penetrated a number of different industries, including insurance, including aerospace, agriculture. So what happens with the technology development is, while if you're in agriculture or aerospace, you're probably not used to looking at retail or maybe oil and gas as an area of technology, Now you have to, because the technology that's being scaled in these other industries can actually start to apply to your business very, very quickly and from areas that you're probably not used to looking at. The fourth similarity is failures and some of the pitfalls that people can run into even if they do everything else well. Whether it's choosing the wrong business model, whether it's choosing the wrong level of complication for their level of digital maturity and their level of sophistication, or whether it's around data management and doing data management poorly. And today we'll just talk about data management. And you can see these failures extending from one industry to another. A very famous example from the consumer space is what happened with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, and this issue of informed consent, where Facebook allowed Cambridge Analytica to use user data without really informing them of how it was being used. And when this came to light, they faced a lot of blowback from customers, from their employees, and resulted in significant financial damage. But you see this same challenge with informed consent and how you're using and how people are using customer data in examples all the time. And here's a great example from the US, the quite prestigious US hospital, Memorial Sloan Kettering, where they tried to do something very similar with a data analytics company, Page AI. In this case, instead of using social media, they were using oncology slides. But they shared it with Page AI without really informing their patients that they were going to be doing this, or at least not in an informed and transparent way. And they're facing similar blowback than what Facebook did. Trust issues, employee conflict, and then at risk of losing their nonprofit status, they put in risk a lot of their government funding. So again, a very similar challenge and a very similar pitfall as to what Facebook did. And really the lesson here is that even if you do all these other things right, you take the right part of your industry that's changing, you choose the right value proposition, the right technology, there are these pitfalls that can really be the Achilles heel of your digital transformation efforts. So we're going to take these lessons now and really apply them to how you might actually use them in practice to develop a new business area. And this is the kind of thing we work with clients day in and day out directly on, helping them to figure out what this means directly for them. In this case, we'll use a hypothetical example to illustrate the ways that you might think about this on your own. So again, we're going to look, as a materials company, we're going to look at ways to develop a new business around healthcare. So we want to circle back and say, we want to take advantage of these changing elements of healthcare, ways that we're going to reduce cost, and ways that we're going to really address an increasingly aged and chronic care population. So we know the trends that we're looking to apply our digital efforts to. And if we look one click deeper in aging, we can identify a really compelling problem around falling. And all the different studies, whether it be from the WHO or the US NIH, around the costs and medical implications of what falling does to seniors every year. So from a materials company, I might look to do something like what Cradle did, which is take a polyurethane foam, develop some low impact flooring out of it. So I might not prevent falls, but I can certainly mitigate some of the medical results from elderly falling, particularly within their house. So I have this new flooring, this new polyurethane foam flooring. How might I use digital tools to increase the product value or develop new businesses out of it, and using digital tools to enable that? Well, I can think about enhancing my physical product by taking not just the flooring, but start to think about a more holistic senior fall prevention and risk mitigation solution. And we'll talk in a minute about how you might partner and use some of the digital technologies out there to go forward on a strategy like this. I might also look to take advantage of the fact that I'm in seniors' home and think about how I might use that as an invisible senior monitoring solution. As one of the big challenges in senior monitoring is compliance, because a lot of seniors don't want to use or wear devices that remind them that they're being monitored. So discrete sensing and invisible sensing is a really big deal in this area. So now I'm going to look for technologies to support this product strategy, whether it's again on the side of having a more holistic fall prevention solution, or it's on this new business creation. So if I'm looking at ways to enhance my physical product in a more holistic way, I can look at companies like Emerald or Essence. And Essence is a company that does a number of things around home monitoring, but they do senior monitoring and fall detection. And a much more established company, or if I'm looking for something that's more innovative on fall detection, I can look at a company like Emerald, which does not just fall detection, but also fall prediction. So they look and monitor gait analysis and movement to be able to predict falls in addition to just monitor after a fall's been happening. And these are the types of companies that at Lux Research, we interview day in and day out and really understand the nuance of these technologies as clients are looking to work with them to do these kinds of strategies. I can also look at the kinds of companies like GTX Corp SmartSoul or Housed by Intellicent that are doing invisible senior tracking. And I can imagine if I'm developing flooring, I can either look to develop a business myself by embedding some sensors into the flooring and try to do some of the sensing myself in maybe a new business area, or develop data out of my flooring that I can sell to companies like this. And they can start to use this in their solutions, and I can develop new revenue streams out of the flooring and out of the access that I have by having flooring in seniors' homes. So we have the technology, we have the value proposition, we know what we want to do in healthcare, but let's look at how we can use our business model and find partners to really support a successful business model. And one thing with aging is it is a global problem, but it's not an evenly distributed global problem. And you can see this is numbers of aged population or people over 65 by 2030 that, again, it's across the board, but some countries like Germany and Italy and Japan have a particularly high percentage of people. And countries like China, while being a little bit less than percentage-wise, given their population, have a huge addressable market in the space. And what you can see is the companies that have the demand for aging solutions don't necessarily match where the innovation is occurring. So what we did is we used our database of over 1 million organizations to find companies that are focusing on aging and senior monitoring and identify where they are. And does this match where aging and market demand is likely to take place? And the short answer is no. The other thing we find after mining this database of over 1 million companies is a lot of the companies in this space have already failed. So even though this is a really compelling business opportunity, it's actually a really hard business to be in right now. Because even though the solutions or some of the technologies and the markets are compelling, it's again an easy area to fall short in. So while some of the geographies like the US and the UK certainly are going to have some demand, they have a disproportionate amount of the innovation activity taking place. So for Lux members, they have access in our database to all of these companies and some of the really innovative solutions coming out of these geographies. But when you start to look and to partner and look to engage with the innovation community, of course, technology is not the only consideration. So it makes companies like Weimai out of China really compelling for their market access. And this company, which has raised over $130 million in venture capital already, a really compelling market entry into the Chinese market. It also helps to identify companies like TeaCare, which is a much earlier stage developer, really focused on elderly care and bed sores and falls out of Italy, where there's not a lot of innovation, particularly compared to the amount of aging that they have within that country. So as we wrap up here, I mean, digital creates a lot of risk, and we know a lot of the companies within physical industries are concerned about this risk. That's part of the challenge of being a big company is there's a lot to lose. But for companies that do it well, there's actually a lot of opportunity in taking market share away from competitors or using digital tools to really up the value of your offerings and really grow. The other thing we've seen working with clients across this is it's really easy to not be sure what you want to do and be afraid of failure. But the companies that are successful here really seize the initiative, and even if the first couple of projects are not successful, the capabilities and tools that are developed in the process of maybe some of the early failures actually help them get a leg up as they go forward and really build out their digital transformation capabilities. And the last point I want to make here is digital moves really, really fast. And much faster than companies in the physical industries are used to moving at. So you really have one of two options on how to respond to this. You either become much more agile than you're used to, which we'd certainly suggest companies do. The other way to do it is the way that Lux really supports, which is to see what's coming further out. And you need to have that longer term visibility so that you can plan for it. And really, companies should do a bit of both. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, John. Tremendous presentation, incredibly informative. And now we do have some time to take a couple of questions from the audience that have come through. A reminder that if you do have any questions, please enter them into the questions box. So, John, I see our first question here, which is in the presentation, you talked a little bit about digital plus process. But what are the major ways companies get more value from their physical products by combining them with digital solutions, so sort of digital plus product?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'd say there's three major ways that people do this. So one is to take the digital elements and combine it to just have a higher value product. And that can occur over a spectrum of integration. So there's stuff where the physical and digital products aren't actually tangibly integrated at all, like what L'Oreal is doing with their wearable devices or what BASF has done with their ZX weather platform, in ways to just really inform customers how to make more informed decisions or get more value out of their products. The next way is a lot of companies within the physical industries want to turn their physical products into more of a service business. And there's a number of reasons people want to do this. And that also spans a spectrum from literally companies like Automated Technologies using cobots to just have that as a service. Instead of selling a cobot, they charge monthly for the product. And if it breaks, they replace it or fix it. To more sophisticated business models where instead of, for example, selling compressors, people are selling on a per use basis or by volume. And then the other way is in this, having this market access or different ways that they have access to interesting data, being able to monetize that in new ways, in new businesses. So whether that's Avis just signing up a partnership with Autonomo, where they put sensors in their tires and take advantage of this fleet that Avis has. They sell that data then back to the municipality to identify potholes. So there's a number of different ways that people are using digital, depending on what their goals are and ways that they're looking to leverage it.
I wish my town would invest in that sensor and the tires. We have some potholes to fill. You mentioned borrowing digital solutions from other industries, and there's another question here from the audience, John, about sort of your opinion or your perspective on which industries are actually doing digital best that you see out there.
Yeah, and that's a question we get a lot. And the short answer is not one industry is doing it better. Different physical industries are doing different pieces better. So, for example, oil and gas has been really strong since the price of oil went down several years ago, in really optimizing their upstream production. So they've been really forward in terms of some of this sort of manufacturing and process on the upstream side. Now, in terms of innovation, it's really been pharma that's been well out in front, and that's happened for a number of reasons. They've been the one physical industry with a shrinking R&D budget. It's an extra premium on being first to market in pharma, and the new drug development costs are averaging about $2.5 billion. So that's a place like we were talking about with informatics before, where we've seen pharma out front and then tools being borrowed down into other industries. And then in terms of the more sort of product focused areas, more of the CPG type of companies have been more forward there of how to use digital efforts in either their in the point of purchase or actually integrating into the customer product experience.
Got it. I think we have time for one more question, it looks like. So a lot of our clients ask this question as they're building business cases, as they're trying to get others inside of their organization to buy off on investments. It's really, really difficult. And the question here from the audience member is, how do companies actually figure out the ROI from their digital efforts?
No, it's another great question. And it's one of the challenges of digital. And it's actually one of the ironic challenges of digital, that it's quite hard to measure. And what we've seen is in the initial early projects that people are able to measure the ROI because they often choose a project that they can measure the ROI, or at least indirectly. So if they're measuring, doing predictive maintenance or something like offshore drilling, they can measure how much downtime costs and then how much downtime they have saved by implementing their digital efforts. The challenge becomes, it's hard if you're purely focused on measuring ROI to get past that. Because once you start to get past individual projects and sometimes called this pilot purgatory, really the true value of digital transformation is as it happens across your organization, it starts to integrate. And when that happens, it's really hard to measure the value of any individual project because it's going into this aggregate transformation, which is why we've seen that the companies that are really successful at this have to be doing it at the sort of group or business unit level, but also need to be doing it at the corporate level and have that C-level buy-in to really drive it through the organization. Otherwise, it does get stuck.
Yeah, I can imagine. Thanks very much, John. That's actually all the time we have. As a reminder, if you have any questions after this webinar about the content or about Lux, how we can help you with digital transformation, please email us directly at questions@luxresearchinc.com, and someone will be sure to get back to you. You can also, of course, follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, or follow our blog at luxresearchinc.com for ongoing information and insights. I'd like to thank you all for your attention. Thanks again to our presenter, John Melnick, and I hope everybody has a fantastic day.